Carl Azus, kicking off a new week and a new edition of CNN 10. It was not an eventful weekend for tens of millions of Americans. The governors of 5 states told people to stay home unless they worked in areas considered essential, like law enforcement, sanitation, grocery and food production, and of course, medical care. On Friday, we told you that more than 200,000 cases of coronavirus had been confirmed worldwide. Last night, there were roughly 320,000 cases. We said last week there were over 10,000 cases in America. Now, there are roughly 30,000. The numbers come from Johns Hopkins University. Part of the reason they've increased so much is obviously because the virus has been spreading. Another part is because more people are getting tested, though in many areas of the world, including parts of the United States, there aren't enough testing kits to keep up with demand. Tests are crucial to help medical officials keep track of how and where the disease is spreading and to isolate those who have it. COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, first broke out in the city of Wuhan, China in mid-December. One question that's kept coming up since it started spreading internationally, what about this year's Summer Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo, Japan? They're scheduled to be held starting on July 14th, and Japan has spent more than $12 billion to host the events.
The Olympic torch is now on the ground here in Japan, but even though it's a sunny day here in Tokyo, a dark cloud hangs over the future of the Summer Games. This is not what Japan was hoping for. A scaled-down ceremony as the Olympic flame arrived at Matsushima Air Base. No crowds, just a few officials and 2 of Japan's most famous Olympians lighting the Tokyo 2020 torch. The Games are still set to begin in late July, in just over 4 months. Japan is hoping for a comeback from the catastrophic earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown at Fukushima 9 years ago this month. Japan's spirit and economy desperately needed a revival. Tokyo 2020 was on track to be just that. The novel coronavirus pandemic changed everything. It's possible the Olympic Games will be canceled, despite Japan's best efforts, says Japanese lawmaker Shigeru Ishiba. International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach tells the New York Times the Summer Games will not be canceled for the first time since World War II, but he now admits postponing the Games is on the table. Last week, Japan's Olympic minister quickly shot down President Trump's idea to postpone the Games for a year. But a recent poll says 70% of Japanese have doubts the Games can go on as scheduled. Do you think it's going to be safe to host the Olympics in July? Under the circumstances, I don't think it's safe, says Tokyo resident Kyoko. As an athlete, I really want to host the Olympics in Tokyo, Kenichi Ogawa says. But thinking of all the athletes and their families, I'm not sure it's a good idea. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Tokyo 2020 organizers say they're doing everything possible to host the Games on schedule. Inside Japan's Olympic Committee, signs of dissent. 1988 bronze medalist Kaori Yamaguchi told the Nikkei newspaper the Games should be postponed because athletes can't train. Dr. Mike Ryan with the World Health Organization says much will depend on how the virus evolves in the coming weeks.
And obviously the government of Japan and the IOAC, with advice and inputs from us, will not make a decision to go ahead if there's danger to athletes, danger to spectators.
Japan was expecting to host 90 million visitors this year. That was before global travel ground to a halt. Analyst Keith Henry says the economic damage could be devastating. The emotional toll could be worse.
In some ways, there's a dark cloud over the whole world, and Japan is a part of that. So wherever that torch goes, it's not going to necessarily be a happy occasion.
Japan's Olympic torch relay begins in devastated Fukushima Prefecture. Nobody knows what will happen by the time it reaches Tokyo.
10-second trivia. Roosevelt, Eisenhower, and rolling adjustment are all the names of what? White House rooms, recessions, amendments, or streets in D.C.? These are all the names of historic American recessions, decreases in economic activity that lasted for months.
America has pressed the pause button on the economy. Social distancing, closed schools, canceled events, curfews. It will have an economic cost. A recession may already be underway. Some estimates for second quarter economic growth to shrink 5%. Layoffs imminent. The tip of the spear is small business. Many don't have big bank accounts to cushion them. They have to pay their employees, pay their vendors and suppliers, pay their own rent, even when their customers stop coming. Big business has deeper pockets, but may need big help too. Airlines are seeking up to $50 billion in aid from the government, a dramatic change in fortune from what had been record airline profits, tax cuts, stock buybacks for its shareholders. U.S. airports are seeking $10 billion in government assistance to offset losses spurred by this outbreak. That's according to one industry source. Tourism, hotels, cruise lines, their business is collapsing. So what has been done? Well, the Federal Reserve has slashed benchmark short-term interest rates to near zero and pledged to help the banking system by buying $700 billion in securities. Congress has already passed $8.3 billion in emergency spending to help increase capacity for things like testing, and is working on relief for some but not all workers to have unemployment benefits and paid sick leave. But many economists say a large, targeted stimulus needs to come together, and soon. A little over a decade after bailouts for banks, workers, and the auto industry divided this nation, here we go again.
Health officials say most people who catch coronavirus will recover, but as the disease spreads and impacts hundreds of millions of lives in some way or another, it can be easy to focus on all of the bad news surrounding it. That's why those who are making a positive difference are all heroes in our book.
At a time of social distancing, empathy and compassion are alive and well. Happy birthday to you. Around the world, people are coming up with creative ways to stay connected, to share resources, and to stay healthy. As healthcare workers risk their own lives battling the virus on the front lines, innovative citizens are turning passion projects into potentially life-saving ventures. One teenager's website has been tracking the virus since December.
It was really hard to just get the straight facts, so I decided that it would be kind of cool if I made a website to make the data more accessible for other people.
And in Italy, a company used their 3D printers to build life-saving respirator parts that were in dangerously short supply. For those whose work can't be done from home, many CEOs and leaders are providing financial support.
This is people's lives at stake. This isn't about basketball. This isn't about the Mavericks.
How many? So 2? All right, there's 2.
Across the globe, communities are making sure people have food. And stores and restaurants are doing what they can to help others. Here in the U.S., world-famous chef Jose Andres has transformed some of his restaurants into community kitchens to serve those in need.
We need to be part of the solution.
And strangers have become shopping angels to support those who can't leave their homes. Even though we've been told to stay apart, the rallying call for prevention and protection brings us together on social media.
If you wash your hands and do not touch your face, then the world will be a better place.
As the country and the world navigate daily life during a pandemic, it's good to know that compassion continues to live on.
Isoperimetric is a word you don't hear very often, and that's just the kind of robot this is. It's made of air-filled tubes and machines that change its shape by moving its corners. That makes it able to hold up a basketball, or do this. Its engineers say it could eventually help with space exploration. I think they ought to apply it to those inflatable dancing tube characters you see outside car dealerships. Because they're already full of hot air, the machines could give them a bit of Gangnam Style. Nobody ever saw something like that before. Of course, they'd do a great robot until they started breaking, and then they'd be left in limbo. It would take a Lindy hop, skip, and a jump to the nearest trash dance, because like they say, here today, Congamara. Alice Deal Middle School. You know the deal in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get your school mentioned, the place to make a request is to comment at youtube.com/CNN10. I'm Carl Azus.